Welcome to the Engine Room Podcast, where host Coach Aaron Sloan and Julie Watson explore the world of boxing through the lens of sport, culture, and science from the Engine Room Boxing Gym in the heart of downtown Tulsa. Our guest today is Scotland's first female world champion boxer and professional musician, Hannah Rankin, a graduate of the Royal Scottish Conservatory with a Masters and Professional Diploma from London's Royal Academy of Music. 30-year-old Hannah grew up on a farm in West Scotland, where she took up taekwondo and the flute as a child. Her love of combat sports and music has followed her into adulthood. Today, Hannah is a professional bassoonist and a professional boxer who's faced top opponents like Clarissa and Savannah in the ring. In this episode, Hannah joins us from London to talk about women in boxing, what it's like to balance two careers, and her favorite boxers.
Hi, welcome to the Engine Room Podcast, Hannah. Thanks for joining us today.
Nice to meet you guys. Yeah, good, thanks.
And you're joining us from London, I assume, maybe?
Yes, I'm in London just now.
Great. But you're originally from Scotland, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been in London for about 9 years now.
So you're there full time now.
Yeah.
And you're still training boxing there, I assume, correct?
Yeah, my coach is based here. I originally moved down to study my masters, but obviously stayed down here to continue doing music as well as training with my coach.
I see.
I'd love for people to know a little bit. I had time to read a little bit how you grew up and to me, when people think about classical music, and especially an instrument like the bassoon, which is what you play, which requires full use of your fingers and hands, and then you have boxing, which anyone that's spent any time in the gym knows there's potentially a lot of risk to the same area of your body. So, but you got into this kind of sports as a young girl, but not boxing necessarily, but combat sports maybe.
Yeah, so when I was quite young, me and my sister, we went to do taekwondo. We did that for 2 or 3 years. I think it was a ruse by my mum to stop us fighting each other. So she sent us to a club where we could officially be allowed to fight. But I really I loved taekwondo, and I've always had a real sort of affinity for combat sports. I love the discipline of them. And so it wasn't really too unsurprising when I got introduced to boxing much later in my early 20s that I fell in love with it. It was just a natural sort of progression for me, if you think of it like that.
That's interesting, but not MMA. When you think about the taekwondo, but did that ever interest you either? I mean, in addition
I stopped doing taekwondo when I got into my music. My mom was like, probably best that you look after your hands. Funny you mentioned it, your hands and your teeth and your lips and things like that. So I stopped doing it to focus on my music. But then when I was coming to the end of my undergraduate in Glasgow, I wanted to get fit again. And going to the normal gym is not my idea of fun. So I automatically looked for some sort of combat sport to do. And I actually started doing some Thai boxing up in Glasgow. So I was doing Muay Thai there, training at the Grip House, and I was loving it, And when I moved to London, I'd look for a gym to do Thai boxing in. And that's when I also met my coach and former heavyweight champion, Derek Sweet D. Williams, and they introduced me to boxing. So that's kind of the progression.
And at what point did you decide, okay, this has been a great workout, but now I really want to compete? I mean, was it a gradual revelation, or did someone encourage you?
So I've kind of got a bit of the sort of nature that if I decide I'm going to learn something new or do something different, then I kind of throw myself 150% at it. So it's I kind of got into it. I actually when I started boxing, it was actually a great relief for me because I was going through a lot of grief, having just lost my mum. So boxing became sort of a bit of a therapy for me. And so my coach was really great. Like having a boxing family at that time was really great because it was different from my own family and people to really just be there for me when I was just feeling a bit down. My coach introduced me to, obviously I was training and then I was doing sparring in the gym and then I did white collar boxing. I don't know if you guys have that over there, but it's you kind of do 3-minute rounds and you raise some money for charity.
Sure.
And it's open to, it used to be businessmen that did it and things like that. So it's open to anybody who can give it a go. So that's how I got into it. And I was raising money for cancer research in Macmillan's, which obviously my mum passed away from cancer. So for me, that was the reason I kind of got into it. And I just found that I loved it.
Well, did you transition into the amateurs over there? Did you fight amateur fights, I assume, correct, before you turned pro, or did you just go straight pro after that?
So my coach was like, well, I said to him, so what's the next sort of step? And he's like, well, it'd be great if you joined an amateur club. If you're really interested, it could take it a little bit further that way. And I said, well, can I continue to train with you if I go and join an amateur club? And he said, oh, no, I don't have my amateur's license. I only have my professional license. And I was like, well, then I'd like to go professional. And he was like, okay. So we'll see how we go. And he took me to spar with some of the professional girls. At the time, it was Kelly Morgan, who was a WBC silver middleweight champion, and Michaela Lauren, who's now a 6 times world champion, actually.
Yeah.
Who's just retired. She's in Sweden. And I must admit, when I had my first sparring sessions with them, it was definitely an eye-opening experience. But I came out of it and I was desperate to get back in there and get better at it. So he saw that I was super keen and actually had a bit of a talent. So he was like, okay, well, if you want to go pro, we'll go pro then. And that was it.
Wow. How old was you when you had your first fight?
So my first professional fight, I was, how old am I? 26.
So
26, my first pro fight.
So you hit the ground running.
I did, yes. I worked really hard. But yeah, like I said, my nature is to, if I'm going to do something, I want to give it everything I can and see how far I can go with it. So yeah, it's gone really well so far.
Well, it's been kind of interesting to me. I've been coaching for 12 years now, and there's a lot of stories that just start with the fitness boxing and then people progress into the competition. But it seems like it is, maybe it's just coincidence, but it seems like it is more apt to happen with the female fighters that I've had. They come in with just, I don't know if they're too worried to tell me they want to fight, until they get in the gym and start kind of learning a little bit, or if they really truly come with the intent to just get in shape and then they fall in love with it and start wanting to compete. But the same story comes from a lot of the female athletes that I've had in here over the years, as they start with the fitness boxing and then progress to the level of competition. So
yeah, I think that's quite true. There's a lot of girls that I know who have got into the sport and then kind of got a little bit addicted to it. It's kind of, it's something that you just want to get better at. And also I think when I first started boxing, I really developed a much better confidence in myself. And I think it gives you that sort of feeling, even if you don't want to progress it to a professional stage or even amateur, doing boxing allows you to build your own confidence within you. And I definitely found when I was in London, obviously it's quite a massive city. I come from a tiny little village in Scotland. So when I moved to London, I was doing concerts late at night, and I found actually boxing gave me a sort of aura where actually I was confident in myself. So I got less approached by strange people late at night, because obviously I looked like I was confident and I wouldn't be easily led astray or anything like that. So sure. I think that's what kind of attracts women to it as well, for sure.
But that must have been pretty exciting. I mean, reading, I guess, basically the first female Scottish woman that has been a world champion. And was that a real feeling of accomplishment for you?
Massively so. It's one of the best nights of my life, to be perfectly honest. It was actually one of the most stressful fights I've ever done, because I was at home and I was in front of all my family and friends. And it's the first time the BBC had shown boxing for a really long time, and I was headlining the show. So it was a chance to make history for my country, and the pressure was really on. But when I did it, it was insane. And having, like I said, it's in the history books, it will never be removed from there. So that's kind of a special feeling, I must admit.
That's really wonderful. And I think about, I'd be interested to know how women's boxing is received in the UK or supported. Do you feel like there's as much support for it as you would expect, or would you like to see it to be a bigger sport?
I think so. This whole COVID situation, as terrible as it has been for so many people and the world in general, economically and all of the stresses caused, actually women's boxing is going to be coming out as a positive. I think the improvement in the sport is especially over here in the UK, is just been really, really massive. When I first started, that's completely different. So wind that back, and I was getting, oh, why do you want to box? You girl like you doesn't need to be boxing. Women shouldn't be boxing. Or, oh, it's the girls' fight, we'll just go to the bar. That was a standard. So Yeah, I must admit, it's really, things are definitely changing, and it's changing a lot quicker than I think they have in other sports. I think that is also down to do with the fact with COVID having happened, and then they were putting on these shows behind locked doors, and Matchroom decided, okay, we're going to put on some massive female fights, which I happened to be part of a couple of weeks ago. And by taking the plunge and putting women's fights on these cards, when there's only about six to eight fights on the card in total, and you've also got kind of a captive audience. People are desperate for sport. There hasn't been any sport the whole lockdown properly, so it slowly starts to come back now. And so you have captive audience, and they're actually looking forward to watching some sports. So they're actually getting involved in the women's fights. And now I'm actually hearing people talking, oh yeah, those are the women's fights. So that Terry Harper, she was boxing, or Tasha Jonas, and they're all talking about these girls. And it like, we're all now household names. And that is an amazing achievement to have happened this year. So it's the one positive I think I would really take out of this 2020 is that women's boxing has literally gone up the way for sure.
Yeah, well, I've seen some of the same thing here at the gym. You know, in 2012 in the U.S. is the first time we started having women in our national Golden Glove competitions, and then that was also the year that they were allowed in the Olympics. And if we wouldn't have had our females in the Olympics in 2012, we wouldn't have had any medalists at all. Our females were the only ones that medaled for the United States. And so that was really good to see. And since then, it's grown exponentially. And with my young fighters in the gym that are, you know, even the male fighters, they're talking about the female fights that are upcoming equally as much. And they're starting the headline shows over here, and people are really tuning in to watch the fight. So, you know, I just think that's been great for the sport. We've tried to always be a big proponent. We've had quite a few decent female fighters out of here, and we've had a lot of success with them, and people really enjoy it once they see that this isn't I always tell my girl fighters, this isn't a sideshow. This is for real. You know, you need to take yourself serious, and we take you serious. So, you know, I think it's been a really great evolution over the last few years for female boxing.
Absolutely. It's great to hear that, you know, like, that's the kind of thing we need as like a positive rhetoric for women's boxing for sure, is that coaches are out there and you're like, you're not the sideshow, you're the main event, or, you know, you're just getting as much time as the guys. And I think that's something that's definitely changed as well, is that lots of coaches are open to having women in the gym, and they're more open to training women, because it is different. You know, I don't know how you feel about that, but I think training a female fighter is definitely different to training a male fighter. There's just different aspects of that. Obviously, there are core things which remain the same, but we are fundamentally different because of the sex situation. So
I'll stereotype you right away and just let you know that female fighters have been a lot easier to train than my male fighters. So
absolutely, and my coach says the same thing. He's always like, you know, it's so much easier to train the girls. You listen to what we've got to tell you. You're very diligent. Half the time we have to kick you out the gym. You're on time. You know. You're always doing it. You're writing everything down. You're very, you know, you're on top of it. Whereas sometimes the guys, they're just like, you know, whatever. So,
I haven't quite put my finger on it yet. You know, sometimes I think maybe it's because the females were excluded for so long. The ones you get in are really anxious to get attention. And then I've thought from some of them, maybe there's not that, you know, maybe there's not that macho persona there that maybe comes along with it with some of the male fighters. Though, you know, I think sometimes these guys want to put on social media they're a fighter more than they actually want to fight, and so, you know, some of that comes along with it. I don't really know what it is, and it's, you know, you're tiptoeing into a little gray area of politically correct things to say when you get there. But it's, you know, to me, I just see the women. It seems like they're a lot easier to train most of the time. So.
Yeah, I think also we've all got that little bit in us which we're like determined to kind of prove anybody wrong that might think that we shouldn't be doing it. So we're always like, we're going to be there, we're on time, we're going to put everything into this, just so in case anyone dare say that we shouldn't be doing it, well, you know, I'm working incredibly hard and I'm putting all my time into it. So yeah, I think there's always that little bit inside the girls where we're like, okay, we're going to prove you wrong.
Yeah, well, I think the coaches love to see that come out of you guys, so it's been a nice experience for me. So
have you felt like from all of this that, I mean, and now it sounds like you have had a lot of attention on you, but even more so maybe now, do you feel like you're somewhat of a role model, or are you being in that situation? Is there any pressure there, or do you even give that any thought?
Well, I think for me, one of my main goals is that I want to inspire the younger women coming through, also younger guys as well at the gym. I want to inspire them, especially our home in Scotland, because we're such a small, tiny country, and it just, to become a world champion, the first ever female world champion for your country, it comes with its kind of, I don't know, that it comes with other things. I have high expectations of myself because I want people to look up to me and also think, you know what, I can do that. If I want to put my mind to it, I can go and do that, and I can push for those sort of high accolades and achievements and goals. And it's open for me to go and try that. So I kind of feel like, when you become world champion or when you're striving to represent yourself and your country, it's also there for the younger generation to follow that act and to give them sort of inspirations and goals as well.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. How do you balance all this, though? I mean, when we introduced you, we talked a little bit about your background with music and, frankly, a music career. I mean, you really are you continue to teach music, you continue to play. At the same time, you're very fully pursuing your boxing career. And for most people, each of those would be full time. So I know that I've read that you think that each maybe is good for the other career, but it's time-wise, you must be very conscious and organized.
Yeah, I mean, my coach will tell you I'm pretty much hyperactive, and he thinks I've got a little bit of ADHD, and I think that's probably very true. But for me, I have to be really organized, and when it comes to music, it depends really. If I have a world title fight that's coming up, or any sort of main fight, that's an 8 to 10 week training camp. And for me, my sole focus is the fight, because if you're thinking about anything else other than boxing, then it's not good. You need to be fully focused on the job at hand. So I'm really lucky in what I do as a freelance musician and as a teacher, that things are flexible for me. So when I have a big fight date coming up, then I focus on my boxing. I still teach my students and the kids because, I have a good relationship with all of them and the parents, and they love to chat to me about what I'm doing, my boxing and things. And it's kind of like a nice relief from training, but I don't do any serious playing because I wouldn't want to go in and do a concert and not feel that I've had enough time to practice or to put enough effort in. So for me, it's very much when I'm not training for a fight, then I will ramp up my music career again. I'll accept work that's coming through and I'll do more things, and prepare more concerts and music. But yeah, it does come in different categories. I won't do it all at the same time.
That's quite a balance. That's amazing. It's impressive.
So do you have do you have another fight on the schedule coming up, or?
So I just fought a couple of weeks ago. So I just having a bit of recovery from that. I stepped up to middleweight to fight for the world title, and unfortunately she was just too big for me. I belong down at welterweight or super welter. So it was a great fight and a great opportunity. But I need to recover a little bit from that one. So my goal is to be out again in the new year around about March time. But we're aiming for me to go down to 147. So it'll be my first fight at that weight, but I'll be a monster at 147. So I'm really excited about it. So we're going to aim for about March time.
And what are you working on with your music right now? What do you have coming up that we should know about?
So because of COVID, it's been really kind of quite depressing, really, because obviously we went into the first lockdown and it was right before Easter. And I was due to have loads of concerts. I had about 5 or 6 booked in for that time, because it's quite a busy time for musicians. And unfortunately, they all got cancelled. And obviously, there's not that much live music happening at the moment, so orchestras aren't playing that much. And I also have a quintet, the Coriolis Quintet, and we do a lot of work with a company called Live Music Now, which takes music and interactive concerts into schools and also into care homes. And obviously, care homes have been off the radar. You can't go into them because of the COVID situation. Sure. So I'm really missing performing, but I'm doing quite a lot of teaching at the moment. And my quintet are always putting together music via online systems together so that it can be performed in schools and things like that. But yeah, no, I would love to say I have a concert in the diary, but unfortunately I don't at the moment.
Is it hard to make that shift? I mean, I can see some parallels, certainly when you talk about the breath technique that's required for your instrument, and people talk very much about breathing and in the ring as well, and rhythm on both sides. But to me, when I think of classical music, it's very different than the visual I get of people fighting in the ring. Are they good balances, good oppositions, or do you not see them as being that different in some ways?
So I actually don't see them as being that much different. I mean, obviously with boxing, there's the actual physical side of it. But when you go in a boxing ring, it's just you and the other person, and it's your time to perform. And it's the same as a musician. You know, when you walk on that stage and the lights go down, that's the moment you have to perform. And it's the same sort of like the heart racing, excitement, you know, the adrenaline buzz, that sort of thing for me. Being in a full orchestra, doing a big performance, and having like the house, like everybody clapping at the end of it, all the way through, that adrenaline buzz that you get from that is the same thing when I have a fight. I have the same sort of emotion and excitement. So yeah, that's my kind of parallel. It's the same sort of performance for me.
That's interesting.
To me, it sinks in on me with the music and the boxing, because to me they're both the 10,000 hour rule applies as far as how much training has to go into them. So the learning and the progression of learning a musical instrument as opposed to boxing, or to me, it just seems really similar in, as far as practice would go and the training would go and the time that you have to put into it.
Yeah, it's all about the discipline of that, you know, and I think that's what drew me to boxing, first of all, is the discipline that you need for it. And my bassoon teacher always said to me, you don't practice until you don't get it wrong. You don't practice until you get it right. You practice until you don't get it wrong. Yeah. And that's something that I apply when I'm in the gym, but I have to look at it a different way with boxing, because there's always so many other alternatives that could happen. And like, so I love the way of learning something new. And then in boxing, I take it apart and I apply it to different situations and different scenarios. So the same sort of discipline is there, but then I get to be almost creative with it, which is quite exciting, really.
Do you study other people's fights? Have you become a big boxing fan throughout all this as well?
Absolutely. I'm a massive boxing geek. So I literally, all the way through lockdown, I was running like, I called it boxing with your breakfast. And so I was like basically researching loads of fights. Like every day I was watching fights, and I literally could do it all the day, all the time. So I'm literally watching all of the old greats and just looking for really interesting fights that people might not have seen. And I was posting new ones in the morning so that everybody could have like some boxing with their breakfast, you know, sit down and watch a fight, and trying to get more people involved with it, because there are so many great fights from the past and great fighters that, you know, sometimes we don't get talked about as much. But it was an exciting little project for me as well.
So who's your favorite boxer?
My favorite?
Yeah.
I don't know if I could answer. There's so many people I love. So I would say that I love Hagler, a big fan. And Sugar Ray Leonard and Sugar Ramos as well. I love him. And Wilfred Benitez.
So you like a lot of the old school stuff.
Old school, yeah. So I love watching all of those. And you know, have you ever watched Edwin Valero?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I like watching him as well. So there's some great ones. Barrera as well. So I can go on a whole list.
That's awesome. So I know you said earlier when I talked to you that you've traveled a lot with your boxing, and I assume probably traveled with your music as well. Have you enjoyed your time in the States? I know you spent some time here. You had a pretty big fight in Kansas, I know. And tell me.
I love coming to America. I'm really missing coming over to the States. It's been like forever since I've been over. In fact, it's been a full year. It's been a full year since I've been in America. For me, I love the way that you guys, like the boxing fans there, are just fantastic. Like I found it really different. It's a different sort of atmosphere to over here. Because when I boxed, so I boxed in Flint when I fought on, it would have been Coach Shields undercard there, and when I boxed in Kansas, and I met like some of the fans there, and people bring their kids along to the boxing, and you know they're quite knowledgeable about the sport. They really want to talk to you about different things. Whereas here, it's more of like a night out. I would say that people come for a night out, whereas there's more drinking involved. Whereas when I was in America, like it was bring your kids to watch the fights. And I really like that sort of family vibe about it. And I love just chatting boxing to people. So yeah, I do miss America. Been to loads of different other places as well. Been over to Sweden quite a lot. I've boxed in Norway. Been to Germany, and I've had some interesting like sparring sessions with loads of different people. Went to Ukraine, into Kiev, I was in Cecilia Brackhouse's sparring camp over there. So that was really interesting as well. So I think that's probably one of the fun parts about boxing. You get to travel. It's the same as music. It's one of the bonuses of both.
Well, we kind of look at you guys a little bit the same. You know, I think people envy what they don't have, because in America we envy a lot of the stuff that goes on over in the UK, because I think that what you're feeling with those crowds is that over there, I think you guys have a generalized fan base for boxing, and in America, the sport of boxing is probably bigger than it's ever been, especially when it comes to money. But the fan base here, there's not a lot of household names that fight here. You'll have the occasional fight with a Mayweather or somebody like that everybody will get together and watch. But most of the time, if you're watching boxing here, it's because you're a fan of somebody directly on that card, or you're their family member or something. So when we promote like local shows, it's really hard to get a big fan following just of general public. If there's somebody there, they're there because they're boxing fans. And sometimes from a promotional standpoint, it makes it hard to put shows on a local basis and kind of keep some of the newer boxers moving until they get big time. And I think some areas, I picture you guys, I may be wrong, but I picture just a little more of a general fan base. So they're kind of, we have that general fan base here for like MMA. A lot of people just come out and watch MMA, no matter who's on the card. They're just MMA fans, and we've lost connection with that. People that have just come and watch boxing, they wouldn't have to see who was on the card. They just know there's boxing, and they're going to come and watch it because they love the sport of boxing. And that just doesn't happen a lot here anymore. They have to really know somebody, and you have to get out and promote them to get them on that show. But the people that do come out, to your point, are really passionate fans, and it's a family sport. And a lot of times those people have boxed, and their kids are fighting, and they're wanting them to do that.
Yeah, no, I found that when I was in Flint, actually. A dad approached me, and his son and his daughter were with him. And he's like, oh, would you mind just chatting to my two kids? They're both involved in boxing, and I want them, looking up someone like you, you're doing all that great sort of stuff in the ring. And it's great to see that, what you can achieve. And I was like, that is amazing. That doesn't really happen in the UK as much. And I see what you mean with the whole, we have a general fan base. I think boxing's definitely kind of come back for sure, especially with Anthony Joshua. Mm-hmm. I think Anthony Joshua did some fantastic things for the sport here in the UK. He's been a great sort of figurehead, and he's obviously used in lots of advertising, but he's actually a great guy, and he's a sort of a nice person for people to kind of connect to the sport. And so everybody knows who Anthony Joshua is. Sure. Therefore, people are more interested in getting involved in boxing to see how he's doing. Kind of like when Nicola Adams did really well at the Olympics. Everybody knows who Nicola Adams is, and it was kind of like the first breakthrough for the UK to kind of be like, okay, women can box, sort of thing. Yeah. So,
Anthony Joshua was definitely a great ambassador for the sport. He's definitely somebody that is a big role model here to a lot of our boxers as well. But yeah, there's just those great ambassadors to the sport like that seem to be few and far in between now.
Yeah.
I
think definitely because we're quite a small country. The fact that we have AJ is definitely a bonus, because everybody kind of knows who he is. So as a whole country, we're all kind of like, oh, we all love AJ. If AJ's on the card, we'll all watch it, sort of thing.
Another question I have, I know we talked a little bit about you getting cornered as a female fighter, but do you get that with your education too? We know that you're highly educated, and do you ever, people say, well, we can't picture a boxer having that kind of educational background. Some people just think boxers should be kind of dim-witted or something, but that's usually not the case. Through our gym, even if our fighters have not been formally educated, we have a lot of really smart, intelligent people, and from that are either artists or musicians like yourself. And there's a lot of talent, I think, in the boxing world that I think gets overlooked sometimes. But
yeah, I think so. I think sometimes I kind of got the other end of it, where people are like, oh, why do you want to box? You're far too clever to want to box, kind of thing. You could go and do anything with those degrees that you've got. And I was just kind of like, well, I like to box because I actually love the sport. I genuinely love it. It's not just something I have to do because I can't do anything else, or something that I feel is the only option for me. It's because I love it. And I think actually the great thing about women getting a little bit more television time is like a lot of us, because there's not a lot of money for women in boxing as of yet. Yeah. I think all of us have other jobs, and like the whole other side to our lives is kind of getting focused on a little bit. So like for example, Rachel Ball, she works with people who, she's fighting this weekend. She works with people who live with dementia. And like, I think every female fighter has another career that's quite interesting for people to hear about. And I think that's been quite good in getting people involved in wanting to watch women's boxing, because they get to know you as a person and know a lot more about what you're doing. And all of us do something a little bit different. So, yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you the question about the female boxing and the time limit of their rounds, but instead of asking you, making you go on, I'm just going to tell you my opinion on it that way, because it's probably the same. I'm kind of dead set against women only fighting 2-minute rounds. I think it's unfair to you guys, and I think a little bit of that could be part of the money, because I've had people say, well, women aren't as exciting because they're not knocking as many people out. And I said, well, I've seen multiple fights that if you guys were fighting 3-minute rounds, there would have been knockouts, because
Absolutely.
I've seen, and actually I think it's more dangerous for you guys, because I've seen people get to that point to where they get to that 2-minute rounds, and I've seen a fighter that fight's almost ready to stop, and the bell rings and saves them, and then they come out and it happens over and over when they could have just been out of the fight.
I'm
Yeah.
so with you on this. I said this before. So I think actually, so if you look at, for example, Clarissa Shields, everyone says, oh, you don't have that many knockouts on your record. Now, if any of her fights have been like, any of the people, like, for example, when she fought Femke Herms, that was 10 2-minute rounds. And like, Femke's a great fighter, but that was 10 2-minute rounds of getting beaten up. Yeah. Every single round, she was getting like taking lots of punches, and then literally, like you said, just getting saved by the bell.
I saw that fight, yeah.
And then she had a minute to kind of recover, and then it started again. And actually, it would have been fairer to her and safer, I think, if that had been 3-minute rounds. It would have been stopped in the fourth.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The fourth round, I think that fight would have been over with, and she would have end up taking less punches over the course of that fight than what she actually ended up enduring because of that extra breaks in those shorter rounds. I mean,
absolutely.
And it was safer for her, and it would have been a better mark on Clarissa Shields because she'd had a stoppage on there instead,
Exactly. So there's two bonuses to come out of that, and also the third one is it's safer for Femke, and she can come out to fight another day, and it's not going to affect her fighting again afterwards. Like there are some fighters that go in and they'll do 10 rounds and they'll basically get beaten up for 10 rounds, then come out of it at the end and never quite be the same fighter again, or take quite a while to get back to where they were before in their confidence and things like that. So why would you not just take less punishment and make the rounds a little bit longer? I personally think that would be a much better route, and I totally agree with you. 3-minute rounds. I'm a 3-minute round fighter. I'd happily do 3-minute rounds.
Yeah.
But I think if to change people's opinions and to get these things done, we have to start like with a compromise. And I think maybe putting 12 2-minute rounds in for a world championship level, then at least we're going to grow the sport. At least we're going to give more levels to the sport, because at the moment it's 10 rounds for a world title, it's 10 rounds for a Commonwealth title. That it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
There has to be some sort of difference, because there's people going in to fight for world titles that really aren't quite ready for that level. So then you've got the elite level, you've got the people at the bottom, and there's not very many people in between. And so, you need to add depth to the sport. And I think by doing that, at least we can start with 12 twos for a world title, and then you've really got to work hard for that. Then hopefully we can then get into 3-minute rounds.
Well, I agree with that, and I think it changes the strategy of the sport for you guys when you have that extra minute on each round. It changes your game plan. It changes how you're going to approach a fight, and
you can set things up.
Yeah, the shorter the fight too, it allows sometimes it allows people that don't necessarily have the greatest skill set to stay in and compete with you just because they're not going to tire out yet either, and the conditioning in itself is a skill, just like a good combination puncher or being able to throw a good hook. I mean, that's part of it. And then if you're making weight and doing those kinds of things, that adds up longer when you add those extra minutes to those rounds too. It changes your whole dynamic on what weight class you're going to fight at. So to me, it's just it's something that needs to be changed, I think, for the benefit of you guys' safety and just for the skill set, for you guys to be able to exhibit your true skill set.
Yeah, and I also think that we've had this such great rise with women's boxing, especially over this year, I feel anyway, over here in the UK, that we'll get to sort of a stalemate point because the sport will not be continuing to grow in depth. And we need to have some sort of development one way or the other. Like for guys, it's, they build up to, like here in the UK, you build up to British title level, which is a 12 3-minute rounds for a British title, and then you win the British title, you think about, okay, the Commonwealth and the European or Commonwealth. Then you're thinking about going, okay, maybe I'm ready to challenge for like a silver title, the WBC silver. Then I'm thinking maybe I'm okay to go for a world title. And that's not an option for girls here. Like we don't have a British title. The first sort of major titles you have are the European and the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
So, that's, and then it's into world title sort of range. And that happens very soon in people's careers. And I think we do need to kind of somehow change that.
It's interesting. We're getting a little bit to the end of our time here, but I did want to ask you, given all the things that you're doing, when you look at the next few years, or maybe we'll even go 5 to 10 years down the line, what do you think about, what would you like for each of the things that are your passions for the boxing and for your music? Do you think that way? Do you think that far in the future, or?
So I think with music, it's very easy because it's something that you can do for very many years. It's a career that you can have right into your 70s, something that you can keep going for as long. And it's a passion of mine. It's not something that I'm going to suddenly not enjoy anymore or not be able to do for a long time. So I think even when I'm that sort of age, I'll still enjoy concerts and I'll still be able to teach. So I think music's something that will always be part of my life. And, when I do stop boxing, I'll do a lot more of it and I'll do more concerts and I'll maybe get into putting on concerts and organizing events and things like that. But with boxing, I really feel that you don't want to be thinking about when you're aiming to retire or what your sort of aim date is, because then even if you say, oh, I'm not thinking about it, fundamentally you have a date in mind and an idea when you want to stop. So for me, I don't have that date. I don't have that sort of idea. What I would love to get into at some point is commentary in boxing, because I would love to do some of that. That's something that I'm really interested in. And I think that we all need some more female commentators for these events. So why not?
Yeah, that's a good point too. I don't see that very often where we have, that I can even think of at all, really, a female commentator.
I think that's brilliant. I think, you would bring a whole new group to boxing, I think, and a whole new perspective. I think that's.
Well, I think we've had Alicia Napoleon. She's done some great commentary, and Franchon Cruz, but it's been like few and far between. Mm-hmm. I commentated for the Christina Hamer Clarissa Shields fight on Box Nation, but like I would love to do it as like kind of a permanent thing, because I think also I'm really geeky about it, so I like research for fighters, watch everything, and I'd really enjoy it, But that'd be kind of like my goal long term.
What about coaching? Would you ever consider coaching?
I want to do that too.
I love teaching, and I would love to do that. Like, so one of my other kind of goals would be to have a gym with my coach, and set up our own gym. And I would love to take some fighters through and work with them. Like, I've got such admiration for boxing coaches, because like I see what I put my coach through, and I'm like, you know what? This is hard work. It's hard work, and there's a lot of like things that go on in the background that people don't really know about.
Yeah.
But I think I'd like the challenge of it. I think it'd be fun.
So what I'm hearing from you is that both of these things will probably be with you in one form or another for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. 100%.
I love that. You've been a fantastic guest. Thank you, because I know maybe our listeners don't realize, it's a 6-hour time difference, and we really appreciate your joining us.
Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a great chat, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, speaking of great ambassadors for the sport, I think you're definitely one, and think you will be for some time to come, it sounds like. So
thank you very much.
Hannah, if people want to find out more about you or keep up with your career, what's the best spot for that?
So I made it really easy for everybody, because I struggle with these things in technology. So Instagram, Twitter, and my professional Facebook page are all under team_Rankin.
That is easy. Good.
Or team_Rankin, and you can't go wrong.
Great. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing your next fight.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Engine Room Podcast with hosts Coach Aaron Sloan and Julie Watson, brought to you by Engine Management and Promotions. I'm Susan McKinney. The Engine Room Boxing Gym in Tulsa, Oklahoma offers competition and fitness training, as well as Ready to Fight Parkinson's-specific boxing. Designed by Coach Sloan, Ready to Fight is the official therapy boxing program of USA Boxing. For more information on all of our programs, visit engineroomboxing.com.